Hey guys, Brian here with Relevant Church. I was feeling ill Sunday, so I don't have a sermon video for you this week, but I thought I would come on and do a short devotional video for you. It's a topic that has really been important to me over the course of my life and being able to function well in the church and outside of the church and in ministry with God, and that issue is submission to authority. It's a difficult thing to preach on. It's not always something we like to hear, but it is a good thing to do a study on. And I'm going to read to you today out of Romans 13. Romans 13, starting in verse 2, says, "Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do what's right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended." There's a number of verses that talk about submission to authority, and I don't just want to focus on the reason why I'm going to teach is submission to authority based on submitting to earthly authorities, but this directly impacts our submission to the authority of God. And so here's what I want to teach you on. Number one, submission to authority is not tested until you come into a disagreement. When you disagree with the authority that is over you. Because the thing is, a lot of times we follow our own authority. Typically when you're young, you got parents that tell you what to do. Then you have school. One day you get a job and you have bosses that tell you what to do. And you're always answering to this authority. And of course, all of us have law enforcement that we answer to. There's another authority that we have. But I know people who have grown into adults that don't work, that have absolutely no authority in their life. They don't listen to a pastor, and many of these people, looking at their lives anyway, it doesn't look like they even submit to God. And that's something a lot of us can relate to. And here's the struggle with submission to God, is there's no immediate consequences. Yeah, we might miss out on a blessing. Yeah, we might have some guilt, but overall, there is no real discipline, significant discipline, maybe I should say, for disobeying God. He doesn't show up the way a boss does and sit you down and say, you know what, we've talked about this, Brian, I'm going to have to do a write-up on you, and next you're going to talk to HR and we're going to be looking at some disciplinary actions. God's got tons of grace, right? And he just floods it all over us, and that is no excuse to disobey God. And so when it comes to obeying people in authority, it's important that we start at the bottom level, which is really the human authority. There's a story that I like. I worked at a church one time, and I was a music minister there. The clergy wanted to do what's called a blended service, in relation to the music, and that was they wanted hymns and they wanted contemporary music, which, this was early in the 2000s, so the worship wars of the 80s, were pretty much over. I mean, there's still some contention there, but and the clergy's purpose was to have something everybody liked. I'm a fairly smart man. And I also recognize that when you have something everybody likes, you also have something everybody doesn't like. And so I told this clergy, I understand what you're trying to do, but I think you're shooting yourself in the foot, and here's why. When people leave church, they don't remember the things that they liked. Typically, they're going to remember things they didn't like. So if you have somebody come in and they like hymns, they're going to go out fussing because of the contemporary. And if you have somebody who likes contemporary, they're going to walk out fussing because of the hymns. So honestly, it's probably better to pick a side and go with it, and this is directly related to my responsibility as a music minister. And it was interesting because, the clergy really, I feel like I was listened to, but it made no difference. And in the end, that clergy was like, I hear you, Brian, but this is what I want you to do. We're going to do a blended service. Now, this put me in a difficult situation, right? Because here I am, here's what I say is the right thing to do, and now I've got this authority over me saying, I don't want you to do what you feel like is the right thing. I want you to do what I'm telling you to do. Now, when we came out of World War II, and you look at the Holocaust and the events of the Holocaust, there were true travesties against humanity that occurred during that time. And there are still things that occur today that are travesties against humanity. But the interesting thing about World War II is you had an entire group of people who were okay with it. No one really stood up and said, this is wrong. And so in further generations, we now have this fear that if we don't stand up for what's wrong when the authority says, do this, now we're potentially harming humanity. That's actually valid. I mean, that's something that you should consider. So here's what I had to do in this particular situation. I had to determine whether this disagreement was a significant disagreement or not. And here's the qualifier that I'm going to give you today that should be helpful to you in submitting to authority. If it is not a significant moral or ethical dilemma for you, submit to your authority. This was not a significant moral or ethical dilemma. It was certainly a focus of ministry, which we can value as very high, but in the end, that minister, that clergy, is the one who makes the decision for that church service. And of course, the interesting thing in this climate, there had been a lot of tension, there had been a lot of conflict. And so as I would go back to the music team and explain to them what we're doing, I would find that, they would often say, well, did the clergy want you to do that? And if I said yes, then this conflict would arise. Well, Brian, you're the music minister. You have authority here, and you need to make sure that they're listening to you and that they're doing what you think, because this is your area, not theirs. Which I kind of had a problem with, but I'm like, okay, and this came from some earlier tension that was there as well. So what happened is I would hear things from the clergy, and then I would go to them, and my music team would be like, oh, is that what the clergy told you? And I would say, this is what I'm telling you. And I would assume that authority over the team that I had. All of that tension vanished. They said, oh, and they would do it. But if you're not in the habit or the practice of being able to submit to authority, you're going to struggle with submitting to the authority of God, because God is not sitting next to you with a belt in his hand waiting for you to mess up. There's a white throne judgment that's going to come one day, and you will have to answer them. But hey, in America, we're all about the buy now, pay later. This is not something you want to buy now and pay later. You do not want to have disobedience now and the pleasure of getting to do what you want to do and to pay that price later on. It's a significant impact, because a lot of times we want to elevate ourselves to the top tier. We want to be the boss. We want to make all the decisions. We want to have all the say. And sure, why not? It's safe. We don't tend to get hurt there. And the truth is, a lot of people who are in authority, sometimes they hurt the people that's under them. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes not intentionally. And if we're our own boss, then we never have to worry about that. But the same thing's true when you're submitting to God, when you're submitting. And you got to submit it with a good attitude as well. You can't just submit and say, well, like this clergy, I could have gone, well, I guess if I have to do it, then that's what I'll do. Well, then I would have gone out with a bad attitude. I probably would have given it half the effort that I should have. And the thing is maybe I was wrong about that. Maybe a blended service really was the best thing for that congregation. Maybe this clergy had a better view and an understanding of the people in their church than I did as a music minister. Inconceivable, right? Of course I had the best understanding. Thank you guys for listening and watching this. I hope you got something out of it. If it sparks some discussion, feel free to put some in the comments below and we can discuss this a little bit deeper. I'd love to do that. It's a pretty broad topic, and this was just a brief glimpse of what that is, the submission to authority, manly and godly authority. So I hope this has encouraged you today. Glad you're watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.